We're going live now.
All right, sweet.
Okay. Welcome. Oh, I'm a little dark here. Welcome, everybody. This is the Swolitariat again here with today Jules, Louise. This is the partner of Ray Alex Williams, who we spoke to a couple weeks back. And I was introduced to her story through what Alex had mentioned before, and I think I may have been following her already on Twitter. Anyway, we've been chatting, and it seems like her story is pretty interesting as well. So I figured we'd have a chat about leftism and gender and transition and sexuality and relationships and all the fun stuff that we talk about on the left today. So why don't we get started with you introducing yourself? What should we know about Jules and then you can go into your story.
I'm Jules from the United States. I still live in the United States. I'm in my 30s, and oh gosh, there are so many descriptors that I can use to put myself in categories that are relevant to this topic. I'm same-sex attracted or bisexual. I am late diagnosed autistic, although apparently there was talk about it amongst the adults a long time ago that they never told me about. What else? And ADHD as well. Hopefully that doesn't derail the conversation. What else is relevant? Naturally gender non-conforming. Just like could not avoid that one, couldn't avoid the same-sex attraction. So I'm one of those believers that those can be like innate, immutable things in females as well as males. I'm sure other things will come up.
And tell us your story, the evolution of your your gender transition and your gender story, and how that coincided with your political.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Too.
Yeah, so I have two brothers, and then my dad also was like a medium level of involved parent, or like fairly involved parent when I was really young. So I was able to play a lot of sports and like wear t-shirts and shorts and sneakers and play soccer during recess and stuff like that. So I was able to kind of get my outlet where I didn't have to always be playing the social game with the girls in like elementary school, which I did find difficult. Looking back on basically everything, I can see a little strand of autism through my life. So, yeah, by the time middle school, I think since like preschool, I literally knew that I was attracted to girls and that I wasn't supposed to be. So I would spin stories in my head of like which boys I had crushes on, which may not have been like fully untrue or whatever, but it was like trying to take myself into the right category and do what like the right thing is, like what I'm supposed to do. It's not like anyone like hatefully pushed that into me. It was just kind of like like this is not what girls do, like this is what girls do kind of thing.
I think that's a really important point just to pause on for a second, because like a lot of people will point to, hey, these people or this kid grew up in a very progressive family or progressive area, progressive town, progressive state, and they were taught homosexuality was okay, but at the same time you kind of intuit and just pick up through the culture that it's still not normal. There's something not quite right. You see the other boys and girls being attracted to each other, and you can tell you're different and you don't want to be different. And so even if the official message is homosexuality totally okay and it's okay to like whoever you want, it still can be internalized easily into this is a bad thing.
Yeah, and I can't really remember like when I really like learned about like people being gay or anything like that. I can't really remember a lot of conversation around it. I know by middle school I knew that stuff, but it wasn't like some kids have it today where they hear about it proactively, and some parents or teachers are proactively saying like, you might be this way and that is okay, embrace it. Like I don't think I got that messaging really until maybe high school. So it was very weird. Like I didn't want to stick out. I was already like very like quiet, keep my head down type person, except for in some situations where I was comfortable with someone in particular. So I could be like a loud, boisterous jokester or like a chatterbox, but it would be like with specific people in specific situations. And the rest of the time I was like, I hope no one else is talking about me. Like, I don't want to stand out at all. So that was kind of my MO all the way through like middle school and high school. Was kind of like, I don't want to be talked about. Like, I don't want to be a topic in the hallways. So, so like if I came out early in middle school when I was starting to be like, I think I'm like that one girl who came out in my middle school, like I would have been the other girl and like I would stand out for that reason. So it was kind of like this, like, keep it quiet. Also, like, am I sure? Like, do I need to say that? Like, do I want to do that? Do I have to do that? Like, do I have to be that way? And like eventually it, like, sometime in high school it was like, yeah, I literally have to be that way because I can't stop like being that way. So eventually I came out. But first it was like in my high school, like it was a public school, and like racially mixed, economically a little bit top heavy on the like upper middle class, but also economically mixed. I was still in the United States. Some cities had a program called busing kids in from a like less well-funded school to a more well-funded school, and mine was more well-funded. So we had some kids bused from the city. So like they were mostly they had to ride the bus so much longer than me. I felt so bad they woke up so early, but
that was
they
me.
were
I had
like
a 90-minute bus ride in the morning.
Oh no. Were you rural or were you just bused
I was
somewhere
rural,
further
yeah.
away?
I was bused in for French in Canada.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, but so we had like all the whole gamut of classes and a lot of races. But it was a public school that was very well funded and did have like a fair amount of, well-to-do economically families. So that's kind of the setting, but also the public school is kind of known to be liberal or on the left for the most part, but not extremely or anything like that. And so we did have a GSA, which was Gay Straight Alliance, and I hear that nowadays they're changing that to Gender and Sexuality Alliance, which is like whatever. It needed to be Gay Straight Alliance then because people were too intimidated to join it if you had to tell everyone you're gay if you're in GSA. So you had to be able to say, I'm a straight ally, just to dip your toe in the water of like even showing up, or like telling someone where you're going or your parents or something. You're like, I'm just being an ally. I'm the straight part of
Right.
GSA. Or you can say, like, back in the day, you could even like, you could get brave and be like, I'm questioning. So I did GSA for a while, but I still didn't really come out. And then this is the part where it gets interesting. I don't hear other people saying this often, other than people that I know personally. There was, like, literally, I'm not exaggerating and I'm not changing like the words of what we would normally call it, a social justice camp offered to kids in my high school and other high schools in my like state or general area or something like that. And it was like a 10-day like overnight camp. Like, you go on a bus to like a summer camp for 10 days in the summer after you applied and you get in. And they taught us about the isms, as they literally called it at the place at the time. So I think, if I remember right, they covered like racism, sexism, like homophobia, I don't know, like homosexualism. I'm not sure if they gave it an ism name.
Let me just pause right there. I'm so like Marx brained. When you said the isms, I was like, oh, Stalinism, Trotskyism, capitalism, communism. But of course, that's not what it was.
No, it was about like privilege and oppression. It's the general like learning and having to accept that you are privileged in some areas, and learning and having to accept that you are oppressed in some areas, and you weren't supposed to like hide those things about yourself when you were there. Like, the day that we did race, there was this girl that sat in the circle that was supposed to be for the white kids, and she was like white passing, and then she like eventually started freaking out and being like, I gotta tell you guys, like I'm partially like I'm like half black, just really light skinned or something like that, like, and she like freaked out and had to go to the other part of the circle or something. They did all these crazy things, like they put the white kids in a circle on this in the inside in chairs,
It's
and
so
like everyone
reactionary.
else in a circle outside of us staring at us, and then they ask everyone questions and we have to talk about them or something. And they did this like gender one where like you have to take a step forward for every time that something doesn't apply to you and a step back for every time that it does apply. So they'd be like, you've been confronted in the bathroom that matches your like sex, but like you've been confronted for like being like non-conforming and standing out, and you felt uncomfortable and you have to take a step back or a step forward, stuff like that. And then you look across the field at everyone who's in front of you and everyone who's behind you at the end. It was so bad. And they did like crossing the lines, like you like cross the line if certain statements about you are true. It was so much stuff. And it was really poorly run my summer because the lady who did it the summer before was actually like supposedly like really competent, like really compassionate, you know, able to, although she was trying to like get us to see the cold hard truths about the world and feel a lot of things, like how empathetic we need to be and how hard we need to work to like raise up the oppressed, and to be aware of every little aspect that we might have privilege. Like I think she was already telling us about microaggressions, but it was a different leader. She left. So my year was disorganized, and it was like more toxic than it should have been. It was like more unhealthy. Like there were a lot more of us that left with like worse mental state afterwards because we were just told yeah, we were like told like, you know, like you're privileged because like your skin color shade is more available at Walgreens and the foundations, and that's an injustice, and like you should be worrying about it. And I would like get home and be like, I would go to Walgreens and be like, oh my god, there's an injustice in the makeup aisle, you know, like it would always be on my mind. I was like, you know, like 17, 18 something. But I did like finish fully coming out there, and so there was a positive thing for me that it was my first time where there were a lot of like queer kids and we like sat together, and we got to like just be really expressive and supportive of one another instead of feeling judged. So that was really cool. But they did a gender unit, and that's when I was sort of, I consider it indoctrinated into gender identity ideology. I know that that term closes some people off from wanting to listen, including most of my more recent friends and acquaintances over the past few years. But anyway,
do you have a personal? How would you describe gender ideology yourself?
um, I was taught in high school through this program and some of my friends that were connected with and did the program before me. Basically, gender and sex are two entirely different things, and I wasn't really told like to link them together in sort of any way. I was told to like think of them as like two very separate things. So like I could be a complete man in this female body and like completely not identify as a woman, and like that could be like who, like it basically seemed like a spiritual or either a brain based or a spiritual thing. Like that's like who is piloting this body is like a man. And I was just told that I was
a gendered
woman.
soul somewhere.
Yeah, either the gendered soul or like my brain is like just totally made different than all the other girls' brains. And so it was so attractive to me. I mean, you know, I had some like mental health, and it turns out like my mental health struggles are interlinked with some physical health struggles that exacerbate that type of psychological struggle. So I had some you know, struggles in high school. I wasn't showing up to school without, you know, like a lot of effort. Like I would want to sleep in, kind of miss school even though I was a good student, stuff like that. So it was pretty stressful. I had some like anxiety, maybe some depression, something like that. So of course I was looking for like what is the answer? Like, is there something that can change, that can solve, that can make it all easier and better for me? Is there something I'm not doing that I can do? And so that's another reason it was attractive to me. But yeah, it was attractive to me to tell me the narrative of why I had so much trouble fitting in with the girls growing up. Like I had no clue I could be autistic. I didn't I didn't want to go to therapy. I was like that person who like would have an emotion and then have an emotional reaction about having that emotion. So if I were sad or angry, then I'd be angry that I was sad. You know, like I couldn't just be
Mm.
like, I have an emotion, it's okay, let me feel it. I'd be like, I'm not sad, I'm so angry that I'm sad, I don't want to be sad, this is making me upset, like I hate emotions, like I need to be strong. And I thought being strong was like not being emotional, like being emotional was weak. I had to like fix all of those ideas in my head.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So by the end of high school I was still thinking that like don't get sad, that's weak. You know, every time I would start feeling sad I'd be like angry at myself for feeling sad, it just makes it worse, no one do that. um so um yeah, so I kind of thought like, you know, like my idea of strength is sort of a masculine idea of strength, and I didn't really realize that there was, you know, strength in femininity or vulnerability or emotions or expressing yourself or anything like that. I thought, you know, like the girls are like weak and I don't want to be like them anyway, and I
And
don't
you
think I'm
you
like
absorb these
them, you
ideas
know?
through a very progressive environment, right?
Yeah, my parents weren't very problematic. My mom, she kind of grew up sort of thinking she was kind of a feminist in that she like got like a business degree in undergrad. Like she didn't want to be either a nurse or a teacher, and those were the main, or a secretary or whatever. Those were the main things that women were told to be in college at her age. And so getting a business degree was kind of like sticking it to the man then. So it was kind of like this thing. Like she didn't really have sort of a revolutionary feminism. She had this feminism of like women can put on suits and go to work and be in charge of things.
Girl boss.
Which, yeah, like, I mean, if that's what some of them were doing at that time, like, I mean, I don't think that did more harm than it did good. I think it's good that we can do those things. It's good that we have a place laid out for us in the business world now. But yeah, like I don't think that that is enough to claim that you're like fully feminist or anything. So my mom didn't really, you know, have like this good theoretical or personal background to sort of like prop me up on. And she also was a cheerleader, like a pretty cheerleader in high school, and she was sort of ashamed of it. Like that wasn't a strong enough, masculine enough, like
Mm.
anti like a feminist enough thing to do,
What
you know?
was she going to high school in the 70s, 80s, 90s?
I think 70s, early 70s,
So
I
that was
think.
that was exactly the time when it became cool to be a tomboy in the
Mm-hmm,
culture,
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
for women to be more masculine.
Yeah.
That's really funny that coincided with
Yeah.
that.
So even if she didn't tell me that cheerleader anecdote where she kind of judged herself for being a cheerleader too many times, I really soaked that one up and I judged the girls around me, and any inclination I would have had to do cheerleading or dance or whatever, which some of the other girls were doing. I don't think I would have had much inclination, but any inclination, any thought of it, I was like, no, that's like bad, you know, like that's for those fools, you know. So it was just really unhealthy in my brain, all these ideas. And I really wish someone would have been there to like explicitly talk about it. But also like having autism and like mental health and physical health struggles, I did make myself less accessible to talk about these things with my parents. And then when I was indoctrinated by the social justice camp, I kind of like flipped really fast to like being really extreme and really sensitive about these issues. Like, I know the answer. I know about privileged and oppressed people. I know about microaggressions. I know about this and that. And so it would be like, everyone would have to walk on eggshells around me then at my house if
Mm.
they were ever going to talk about it, because they couldn't say the wrong words, or I'd be like, you're saying the wrong words. I know better, you know, because the camp taught me, or my friends who went to the camp the year before me taught me. So I was like super indoctrinated. I wrote this essay in high school. I actually did do some classic like LGBT activism. I did do some activism in favor of trying to get gay marriage legalized, which was really, really cool for me. I really loved that I did that in high school. And I pretty much put that in one of my main college application essays. And I think that's a huge portion of what got me in. Of course, I had great grades, stellar test scores, whatever, but I think my essay is kind of what got me in most places, saying like I was an LGBT activist, is what I said in my essay in high school, and that I wanted to continue it on in college. I
Wow.
think that's why I got accepted. I applied to a
Wow.
lot of small liberal arts colleges, so they were happy with that. Uh, so I came to college already like full social justice warrior. Like as soon as I heard the term social justice warrior, it was not yet used as a pejorative at all ever, because not enough people had heard of it, and I was definitely using it, and it was a positive thing that
You're
we were
like
all
me.
using for ourselves. Yeah, we were all using it for ourselves and each other, like we're social justice warriors. And so it did start out as a positive in-group thing before other people heard of it and started being like, "Ah, oh, you social justice warrior, are you?" But yeah, so I was a full-on social justice warrior, went to college and was like, not, I missed the opportunity. The school I was at had more diverse opinions. I missed out on them. I even took a class that was specifically to show us like both sides of the culture wars on several like hot button issues, and I just remained like super far to my side and just was like, nope, I didn't learn, I didn't listen. And then whenever I delved into like the gender studies department, I took queer theory. I didn't take the class that like taught me what each wave of feminism thought. I totally missed out on that. And I even worked at like the women's center. Like we had like a legacy like women's center before like gender ideology invaded it. But yeah, by the time I was at college, I was like severely obsessed with like whether or not I was trans, and if I was trans, was I like some middle third thing, which wasn't like a big well-known thing then. Like, was I like non-binary? Was I they them? That wasn't, almost no one had heard of that, even in like my crazy far indoctrinated left circles. Or was I like completely just like a trans man, and did I need to just like completely transition? And I was like, well, I don't want to stand out. Still the same me. I don't want to stand out. I don't want people to talk about me in the hallways or like, you know, outside in the courtyard, whatever, at college. Um, so when I finally bit the bullet after watching YouTube all the time and just like ruminating over this for way too long, I finally just said like, I either have to do it or learn how to drop it. And I was like, I don't think I can make myself drop it. I just have to try it and see if it works. So I just socially transitioned like that. And new name, new pronouns, like completely to the other side. Like I'm a man now. And I still worked at the women's union that semester, and they were really happy with having me there.
As a trans man, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned your autism and ADHD, and we know that the rates of both ADHD and autism and a few other things like BPD and OCD, gifted children, these are all traits that are very common, like abnormally common among kind of LGBT identified youth. How did that your ADHD and autism express like into the gender world that you were entering? How did it affect it?
I think that like I give complete credence to the people who talk about autism really impacting young females like thoughts and concepts about gender and themselves and their like gender identities. So once they're told that sex and gender are two different things, and you have some sort of gender identity that you know, once you figure it out, it'll tell you like, you know, the formula, like what percentage masculine and what percentage feminine and what percentage anything other you are. I literally at the time, sorry, this is funny though, I hadn't even brought this up in a long time. I literally at the time, I think freshman year, maybe sophomore year of college, knew that I was supposed to be open enough that I called gender like a like universe. So it was like a three-dimensional thing where like you could place yourself anywhere. Like it was not a spectrum, it wasn't a binary, it was not even a spectrum where you're on the line. I was like, it's a universe. You're just a star in the universe somewhere. You're any type of gender you say, anywhere. There's so many axes you could define it on. Some people just like nerdiness is their gender, like geekiness. Like
Oh my.
Yeah, I really thought that is a
And what
bit
was appealing about
much.
that?
I have high empathy, extremely high empathy. So I think there's a female typical type of autism, which some males do have. I have a friend, sort of friend. I don't know him that well, but we've been talking. Who definitely is male and definitely has the female typical type, which I think is the highly sensitive type, high empathy and high sensory sensitivity. So I dated an autistic guy. I don't know, a long time ago, like a decade ago or something. And he had low sensitivity and low empathy. Like he was questioning whether he was a sociopath or a psychopath, like by definition, because he had that like type of thing where he couldn't tell what emotions he was feeling. And it was like a puzzle to figure out what emotions someone else was feeling if they didn't just say it to him. Like he would try to like figure out their face and like what it looks like and be like, that goes with that emotion. Like he had a lot of trouble. I think that's called alexithymia, when you can't tell your own emotions. Like I would literally tell him like, I think you're actually upset right now about this. And he'd be like, really? I'd be like, yeah, I think we should talk about it. Like you seem to actually have feelings about it. And he'd be like, I can't tell. So it's like the opposite. That's, I guess, the male typical, although males can have the female typical and females can have the male typical. So, and then I think it goes hand in hand with the sensory sensitivity. So I will be really sensitive to sounds, smells, light, stuff like that, like overly sensitive to the point where it's disruptive in my life. Um, Although he had some of that sometimes. He had migraines, so that confounds the whole thing. But so yeah, I'm not sure about if they go hand in hand actually, but yeah, there's sensory sensitivity and then there's like the emotional and empathy, like high sensitivity in that way. And I think the female typical has like often has like too much empathy. Um yeah.
One thing
So
I often hear about is one of the traits is in autism is black and white thinking, and
that does
that
occur for me, yes,
yeah,
definitely.
and that coupled with like you mentioned earlier, you felt like you didn't fit in.
Hmm.
Maybe there's something different about you. Yeah, you weren't quite fitting in with the other girls, and so yeah. Do you think black and white thinking affected your path or your receptivity to these ideas?
Yes. So I think the high empathy allowed me to flip my switch completely when I learned there were oppressed people. And it also allowed me to put myself second or last when it came to, like, instead of logically analyzing this gender and sex concept, it was easy. It was a little bit like I was a little bit influenced by like my empathy for what other people are telling me. I'm just supposed to believe them at face value because they're telling me about themselves. So how could they be lying? And that's also a little bit black and white, I guess. But yeah, if they're telling me about their experience, like they're the ultimate, like source to tell me about themselves. Like so if they say their gender is somewhere in the multiverse and it has nothing to do with femininity or masculinity and it's not on a spectrum, I just have to say, well, I love and embrace you. You're very important to me and I want to tell everyone about you so they can accept you, you know?
Mm.
So that was kind of like, yeah, I think my autism made me susceptible to that, but also like being gay made me susceptible to that because it all kind of got mushed together. So, like I was like, just beginning to be brave about coming out as being same-sex attracted, and then at the same time was told like, well, you need to examine your gender as part of the same journey. Like they go hand in hand, figure them both out. So I thought I had to. I thought I had to believe it. I thought I had to figure it out, which I think was like the most harmful thing anyone told me in this whole journey. Is that you have to figure your gender out. That's so distressing. Like then you just sit there like, what? And then I just spent so much time on it and I
Oh
was like
my.
so uncomfortable for so long and just wasted time and didn't like feel as comfortable socializing when I got to college, like missed out on making some friendships closer because I was in my room watching YouTube like,
Right.
am I a trans man like this guy? They were at that stage they were making the videos like, this is my voice one day on T, this is my voice one week on T. Like those were the videos that were on YouTube and it was like revolutionary. So I'd watch those. And they also did that thing where they say, if you wonder if you're trans, you're trans.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel the internet, I think, seems to play a big role. Like, and especially the ratio of, like, the rabbit holes you can go down, and these echo chambers that you can get into, these forums, these YouTube channels, these subreddits, um, where everybody's kind of validating each other and hyping each other up for gender and transition, and finding each other, and um, finding communities. Which I wonder if, like, if there was an excitement in finding maybe a community that you felt, you that understood you, or you fit
Mm-hmm.
into,
Mm-hmm.
and if that goes hand in hand with maybe some of the attraction of, like, just this link between the gender stuff and leftism or politics in general. You see people kind of getting into one and the other kind of almost at the same time,
Yeah.
as if they fit into each other.
Yep. Yeah, that was all wrapped up for me in high school. I also was questioning the existence of God, and I was doing debate. So we were debating a lot of political issues, and like socio-economic, socio-cultural issues, policy issues. So yeah, I was doing a lot of learning about that, and I was learning philosophy in high school. I did read some of the classics and use them in debate and stuff. So um, yeah, it was a lot, all at once, all kind of jumbled up together. I don't think it turned into something super coherent, even though it seems like I was, your stereotypical progressive liberal feminist, queer feminist at that stage. I don't think my thoughts were fully coherent as one ideology that all made sense and I could tell you it all and it would all make one picture. I don't think so. And I think I kind of knew that at the time, but I couldn't resolve that. So I had to just like go with my gut or my thoughts on each separate topic and be more strong and more focused on some of them than others. And yeah, I couldn't resolve it, even though I was like bright, gifted at academics or whatever. And around other people who wanted to talk. But yeah, I don't know. I couldn't make a coherent ideology at the time, even though I was doing so much that made it seem like I was this stereotypical left, progressive, liberal, feminist, queer person. It didn't all fit. It didn't all fit. It wasn't all one picture that goes together. Some of it was contradictory, and I could tell inside of me, like I had contradictions in what I thought. I couldn't resolve it. I didn't even. I was like, I can't.
And
So.
how much did the community aspect of it
Oh yeah,
help
sorry, I
you?
didn't really answer that part. Yes, finding a community, uh that's also part of what really got me. At that social justice camp, there was the queer community. There were the queer kids, and it felt so good to finally be able to say like I am attracted to women, like, and everyone else be like, dude, yeah, that's normal. Yeah, good. Yay, let's celebrate it. And it was blissful. Like we all felt safe. We all felt free. It was amazing. But then they also did this activity for gender for the isms when we were on the gender unit. The women stay in a circle, the men go in another circle, and all the trans are questioning people go in a room. And so I sat in the women's circle, kind of tentatively, like, what are they going to talk about? Am I going to relate? Do I think it's okay for me to be here yet not understand other women and not feel like I'm the same as them? Like, am I going to feel like I'm a woman after this conversation about what women are? And that camp, one of their worst mistakes is that they train the high schoolers to come back the next summer and like sort of teach these lessons, like sort of lead the conversations. And the girl they trained for this one, they did not train well. She freaked me out. She was like, all women understand each other innately. We all just get each other. We just fit. We just click. Like we all just we're like so alike. And I was like,
Nope.
I'm out. I'm out. Like booked it to the questioning and trans room, and there they had an adult leading the conversation who was trans identified and was like, we're all the outcasts, we need to stick up for each other, we're here for each other. And I was like, Yeah, I love it here. I'm
Mm.
trans, you know?
The
So,
island of misfit toys.
yeah, so the group got me even from just that 10-day thing. And then going off to college, it's like I really wanted to be around the other like queer kids. And at my school, the word queer was already being used. And that's in like the late 2000s. Because we had a couple activists on staff, like administrators or professors or staff faculty of some sort, um, who wanted us to use the word queer and be like political about our identities. So immediately upon coming in as a freshman, I had to identify as queer and I had to get comfortable with it in order to like go to the group activities and the official like organization club thing and all that stuff. So yeah, but I wanted to go to that stuff because I felt that like unity and that freedom with all the like queer kids at the social justice camp, and I was like, I need that here. Like I need to feel free to express myself, or I might just like not express myself. I need to like not just like be that kid who doesn't want to stand out in the hallway and like not tell anyone I'm gay. Like that would make me so sad if I did that for all of college. So I had to go to the queer stuff immediately. So then I was immediately like politicized and activated in that way as well.
Yeah, I working in a revolutionary Marxist organization for 3 years. You did. I felt like a lot of the people we came across that would say they were interested in socialism seemed to be there because they more so because they were collecting ideologies or something to put in their bio, and because they wanted a community of people that maybe were also misfits like them.
Yeah,
They're
I understand the misfit part. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, so and it didn't make for the best. Some of them ended up being good comrades, but in general, it didn't make for the best necessarily recruiting. The quality of people, they weren't really there to do the work or to learn or to put in the effort. They had kind of other things in mind.
Wow.
Tell us about your. Okay, so did you go on any medications? Did you go on HRT?
I did not do any medicalization at all. So I did used to call myself a detransitioner because when I transitioned socially and then detransitioned socially, so name and pronouns, the way I dress, and the way I try to interact with everyone in places I go and whatnot, the way I try to be seen, all of that. That was considered a transition, social transition back then in like the late 2000s, mid to late 2000s. And then when I detransitioned in the early 2010s, it was not even like a word, detransition, that I knew of. And then eventually, like probably a few years into that experience, I was super uncomfortable and ashamed with my detransition. It was a shameful thing. Like to say like, oh, I was wrong, and to like try to undo all the work you did with everyone around you who had never even heard of trans before, and you had been like, call me a man, like please don't mess up for like a while. I felt like shit. I was like, I'm so sorry guys, and I just like hid my head and was like, I don't want to show my face. And that's how most people felt back then when they detransitioned. It was super shameful.
But do you think that shame prevented people from going through with that decision,
Yes.
or telling people about it?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people. Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
So,
But
so that shame
it
alone
also,
would keep people in the transitional
like once
stage
you've put all
longer
your
than they
eggs
wanted
in
to
that
be.
basket, when you put all your eggs in that basket, especially back then, when that means you're like potentially like the one person changing everyone around you and exposing everyone around you to the idea of what trans is. Like I changed things at my college. Like there were policies and stuff and like social things and everything that like were having to be talked about and adapted like on my behalf. Like I'm the trailblazer for the trans people at my college.
You made an impact.
Yeah. So and there were other people that wound up transitioning after me and did medicalize and are still transitioned, who had some sort of fascinating interest in me before they were sure they were trans and before they came out. And it turns out their interest is because they wanted to see what it was like to be out as trans. So it wasn't about me personally at all, but they were mostly like gay women that I already like vaguely knew, and then all of a sudden they like wanted to be my best friend or like go on a lot of dates with me, and then like, you know, later in life after like a year or two they'd just be like, I'm trans.
Right.
Like,
Oh dear.
it's like, oh, you were just observing and admiring my transition, okay.
That's funny. That's the story of what is it? Natalie Wynn, ContraPoints, and
Oh gosh,
AGP
Philosophy
Tube.
too.
Yeah, Philosophy Tube. Speaking
I
of which,
heard that they're linked, but I don't really know if they've publicly talked about each other that much, or if they've really shared that they were linked that much.
well, yeah, Natalie.
I
is
don't want to
left-hand.
like be like too gossipy about these people, but yeah, I've heard that they were linked. I've heard that, yeah. I've
So-
heard that.
So, speaking of which, like obviously, kind of the elephant in the room here with relationships is your relationship with Ray or Alex. Would you go by Ray or
Ray.
Ray? So, how did that? Did you start dating before he transitioned? How did that all go?
Yeah.
And how was that for
so I detransitioned and I started thinking basically really simple thoughts. First off, I didn't want to stand out. Second off, whatever was going on with me psychologically, emotionally wasn't improving. I was just like really uptight about everyone gendering me properly and trying not to stand out. And so it kind of made it worse. Like I didn't really want to leave my room unless I had like the exact right outfit on and all that stuff. And so I was like, this isn't working for me. Maybe I'll revisit it later, but this is not solving whatever's going on with me right now. Also, like, I don't want to stick out, and I'll just like let society just see me for how they see me. And I know for me that I'm have some masculinity inside, and that's fine. Like, that's still true. It's fine. And so I was like, I can call myself a woman and have some masculinity and some femininity. It's fine. And I started trying to get to where I valued my femininity. And eventually we did find, like, there was a little group of detransitioners, some medical detransitioners and some social detransitioners. It was such a small group, and we did find each other. And some of the posts on there were people like, it was like a female group. It was like reconciling with womanhood or something like that, or like re-identifying with your womanhood or being female or whatever. And they would say all these beautiful things about, like, yeah, I try to like learn how to value my body by like doing art or yoga or whatever. And I'd be like, oh great, like reconnect with my body. And I was like, oh, that's actually really beautiful. And they'd be like saying other things too, but they also would say like, it's okay, it's part of your gender journey. So I got to write it all off as I still believe in this gender identity ideology, and I could transition later. But right now, this is where I'm at, and it's not bad. It did take some of the shame off of me, and that's how I used that. I knew I was using that to take the shame off of me. So as part of my gender journey, I didn't make a mistake. It was to get myself through that part of life. It's okay, it's part of my life journey. So it was partly good, but it also was sort of like one of those things that made me like not need to question like why I went through such a tough time. But so that's how I detransitioned. And then a long ass time later, yeah, I should go through more stuff before we get there. So let's see what's relevant. So eventually I was doing better with my health and my mental state and my emotional state, feeling really independent, like really able to support myself, take care of myself. You know, like if my parents tried to question me and say like, do you need our support? Do you need our help? I would be able to say, I'm actually fine. So when I got to that point, I started going to a lot more queer stuff. I was not at college anymore at this point, and I started going to a lot more queer stuff in my area, like drag shows, and I don't know, a bunch of other stuff. And I started doing more like political stuff, just like what's going to be on the ballot, let's gather signatures or knock doors or whatever, you know. And then I met this guy on Tinder, and he was a communist, and I was like, I'm so curious about communism. Like, I'm so curious. And I started listening to a podcast. It was Rev Left Radio, which was really good the first few years. I'm not sure now.
I started listening to them too, way back.
Yeah, yeah, he's a really good host. He asks really good questions, and he does a good job of like summarizing what the other person said and then saying, did I get that right, and then adding to it.
Yeah.
He studied some philosophy in college
Brett,
or something,
right?
so yeah, Brett.
Mhm.
He might be Canadian. No, he has a Canadian guest on sometimes though, I think. But yeah, so I started listening to that, and then I started trying to just understand like Marx and Engels. I just decided to like try and focus on that, Marx and Engels, and like I kind of got, you know, sidetracked and interested in a few other things, and that was fun. But I was like, I want a really good like understanding of if I feel like I fit with like the communist perspective, like is that a perspective I agree with? So I was like, Marx and Engels, like see if it jibes with me, you know? So I worked on that for a while, and then I was finally like, I was friends with that guy from Tinder, and like we were like best friends by then. Like
Wow.
it was great. He was great. And he was a professor in something else, but a professor, so he was like super nerdy, like not just a communist by name, but actually like tried to steep himself in theory and everything, and had been active with like a group of communists before, but they had disbanded for kind of like the normal reasons, like social stuff, you know. Like somebody did something wrong against someone of some identity or a group of people of some identity, and then they all split into two sides, like he was wrong, he was right, and then they split off. I feel like that happens to like 80% of leftist groups at least.
True.
But so he was not doing anything. He was just being a professor and making friends with people and like going to concerts or whatever. So I was like, we should go around town, find all the communist groups and like socialist groups that actually meet or do stuff, and decide which one we want to join. So I literally did that. I met so many different people in so many different groups, and it was really cool. But then we made the decision together. It seemed like we joined a really good one, but the infrastructure of it crumbled. And the like de facto leader type guy, who was really good at leading, like he was very good at accommodating people at the level to which they could be involved, like not over pressuring them, but not like under pressuring them. It was amazing. He was so good. Such a good leader.
What group?
Organizer. It was just like a communist group. We were trying to help people with the material conditions of their lives and help them get training and get into unions for the most part.
You don't remember
And we also,
the actual name?
I don't want to say, because I don't want to say what city I live in.
Sure.
But they're loosely associated with CPUSA, Communist Party of USA. Like the
reformists,
so
Stalinists.
you can trace the lineage, like it goes back.
Gotcha.
But I guess there's like, you know, a break in the lineage where like, you know, it wasn't very powerful or strong, but you can still trace the lineage. So it's mostly like old guys and like young guys. There wasn't really at CPUSA, but yeah, so the infrastructure there kind of crumbled. So this guy who was like a charismatic leader went by they them and was like, you know, non-binary, and was like, all right, we're not just gonna do like, our next group is like communist stuff for unions, we're gonna help queer people with jobs in unions. I was like, okay. Like he just kind of brought me along so fast that I couldn't really say no. He was like, you're part of the founding committee, we're gonna like come up with like, you know, formal like goals and stuff, and you're gonna help brainstorm them, and then we'll bring them to a larger audience and try to refine them. I was like, okay. So I was already in it, even though I was like uncomfortable talking about gender and trans stuff at the time, because I still was like kind of waffly and knew that my ideology on that was incoherent, and I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to think about it, because like all my friends were like trans and queer, because I need to go to queer spaces to feel like I can be myself. Because I'm gender non-conforming and gay, so I need that. Like that's where you can be free. But I don't think gender identity ideology is productive or helpful. It's harmful to me. So I didn't want to face that and have to like have that break with the people around me where like I think something else, because it was also like large policing about like who's transphobic, etc.
Yes.
And my very revolutionary friends literally did punch TERFs in the face at bars.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure
it wasn't
they thought
it wasn't just like a dialogue like I would punch a TERF or you should punch TERFs. They were like, I punched a TERF yesterday. We both got thrown out of the bar. I call it a win. I was like, okay.
I'm sure they thought they were doing something for the socialist revolution.
It's like that no platforming thing. Like, if you're that hateful, you don't get to say anything, you know?
Yeah.
But turns out they're not necessarily that hateful. If I'm not a TERF right now, I'm very TERF adjacent, so whatever.
Okay, big turnaround.
I mean, I'm just a Marxist feminist. Like, even on the Rev Left radio podcast, there was a Marxist feminist episode pretty early on, and I listened to it, and whoever that woman was who was a guest only one time, only part of the episode was effective at this, but it grounded me in like the material reality of being like a female person and how important that was to identify as a woman, and that it means something that's linked to your body as a body that can like that has like certain reproductive functions, can carry a baby, etc., and is like different than a male body. It like grounded me in that entire materialism. So that was early on when I was like starting, like before I even joined the first communist group. So when I got kind of like pulled along into the second communist group, I already knew that I was partial to like at least strongly identifying myself with my female womanhood and trying to like be a part of the continuous lineage of like people who have spoken up or been active for like women's rights, etc., for like things that are materially necessary, like things that are materially true that we can't change. Like our body is capable, or some of our female bodies anyway, are capable of carrying babies. That has an impact, a huge, tons of impacts on life as we know it. You can't really take that away. So I was like, that's a materialist perspective. That's a Marxist feminist perspective. And then my queer, probably non-binary, like communist friend, or maybe anarchist, I don't know what she is, did like a socialist feminist book club, and we read Sylvia Federici, Caliban and the Witch. And I was like, all right, reproductive labor, like the labor of not just like reproduction, like having a baby, but like the labor of, you know, like getting the worker ready for work, like keeping up the house, feeding him, clothing him, or not necessarily him, but, you know, whoever's doing like the housework. That the Sylvia Federici would call it like reproductive labor most of the time. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is what like true feminism is about, you know? So I was so grounded in that, and yet I went to like this group that was like so trans ideology based, and that's what I did next.
This was this was the Marxist group.
Yeah, it was like get trans and queer people employment protections, try to get them into union jobs, try to liaise with the unions, and get them power and voices in the unions, but also get the people who are already in power in the unions to understand what types of stuff they should be negotiating for in contracts, so that these people have rights in their contracts that are related to their queerness. So some of it was really, really, really awesome. Like I liked that we got some unions around here to put in like gender expression. So like if you're gender nonconforming, you know, you put on you're a male and you put on makeup and long hair, they can't fire you specifically because you looked different as a male. Like they tried to negotiate that into some of their contracts because we told them like, hey, this is why that would be important, and they did it. So like some of it was really great, and we helped a lot of people who just had no prospects for jobs like get into unions, which got them a lot more steady work than they would have otherwise. So yeah, it wasn't terrible or anything, but you know, I also was just doing a lot of trans stuff.
And how did this all lead to meeting Ray and that story?
So that communist guy turned out to be a mutual friend of his, and also him being trans, like I had my Tinder, I found him on Tinder. I had my Tinder settings for women only, and I would not have found him if he was identifying as man, because I wasn't swiping on men. There are like a million men looking for girls. There aren't that many women looking for girls. Yeah. So I was more interested to see, because also being like autistic and very detail oriented, it's harder for me to be like, not you, not you, not you, not you, really fast. And like super empathetic. I'd be like, oh, I could give him a chance. Like, no, you're just supposed to say not you, not you. So I didn't want to waste my time on the male side is like too many people. So yeah, I found him when he was a non-binary trans femme, or a trans woman if he wants simpler words to describe it. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like, this is my sweet spot. Like, I'm so comfortable with queer people right now. This is great. Mutual friend vouches for them. Like, the profile said all these like intellectual interests and stuff like that like matched up with me. And I was like, this reminds me of my best friend. We would have great conversation. And my best friend was the mutual friend and said like, yeah, good person. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to date right now because like I'm like not in the exact phase of life to do it. But like by the time I decided to start dating, I was like, all right, I'm messaging this person. And my like instincts were right. Like I knew that was the person to save. Like, don't waste my bad days where I'm not very reliable and not really into dating and just kind of like going out for drinks or whatever. Like, don't waste that on this person. Like, wait until I'm really looking for a relationship, then message them. I did it. Boom. Perfect. We're a good match. That's it.
That's great.
So it was because he was trans. I would not have met him. I would not have gone on a date otherwise.
So he was already trans?
Yes. Yeah. Had been
identifying
for
as a woman.
A bunch of years. Yeah, a bunch of years. Already transitioned completely. Like, and completely satisfied.
So did...
With transition.
Did Ray's femininity appeal to you more? Did the masculinity appeal to you at all?
I think I'm like if the Kinsey scale has, you know, a good descriptive, you know, capability, like I'm like, you know, it's like 0 through 6 or whatever, and 6 is like you're entirely gay. I'm like 5.5, maybe 6, you know, like like I was looking to date like queer people and women at that point. So that's what I did, and now our lives have changed, but we're a match. Like, that's not gonna change. So I'm not upset. It's just a very strange path we've taken to get here, but it's cool. We're learning so much about life right now. We're going through all these changes, and yeah. And
so you had already gone through this whole period of disillusionment with gender by the time you already dated
I didn't
him.
lean into it. I did not lean into it. I would say things like, I have trauma around the topic of gender. If you're going to bring it up around me in like a personal way where you want to talk about like gender with me as a concept, as a personal thing, personal to you or to me, ideas about it, experiences with it, feelings about ourselves, like you have to warn me and ask permission first, because I have trauma around that. So I wouldn't talk about it. I was like, no.
And did you help or play a part in Ray's path out of his
yeah so you have to use a light hand on something like that. I'm not trying to sound so like I know everything. It came out really weird, but no, I really you know, I was scared to try to impact him on the topic, but it was a mutual loved one in our life, was more or less newly out as non-binary, interested in transition services, and extremely upset about the political climate, anyone debating anything to do with transgender healthcare or anything else, extremely upset. Because, like, you know, a baby tran, stuff. And, like, by the time, like, Ray had been trans for, like, you know, 7-8 years. So Ray was like, yeah, it's just another cycle of politics. Like, they say we're terrible. They say they don't like us. Like, okay. But this other person who was a loved one of ours was so distraught. It was like messing up their ability to function. It was really upsetting to watch. And they were getting more and more desperate. Like, everyone should be helping trans people. Everyone should be speaking out, like trying to go to the Capitol building, trying to talk to people and tell them why they need to stop, like trying to fight against trans medical care or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, okay, like I'm starting to feel guilty because I have a backstory. I technically count as a detransitioner or a desister. That's like a strong place to be in support of trans rights and have that backstory. So I'm starting to feel guilty. I'm starting to feel like I can overcome my emotional and psychological barriers to confronting this issue and thinking about it, like, so that I can see what my thoughts really are on this topic that I've not wanted to confront because I don't want to lose all my friends or confuse myself or feel upset. I can look at it, sift through all the information, come up with some coherent story and strategy I would want to tell them, legislators, and start trying to get my message out. And so I looked and found out that, actually, like, I feel like I was done wrong by this ideology. I feel like it was destructive to me. And I feel like it's destructive to that person right now who's very distressed about it. And I feel like it was destructive to most of my friends. And I started thinking about all the ways that I'd seen it, like, wreaking havoc in all these people's lives for the past few years. Like, it has a material impact. They have less stable jobs. They have less stable psychology, like
relationships.
Housing, everything. More likely for like substance use.
Now hold on. Couldn't the argument is that this is because of society's transphobia that these people run into these problems with relationships and jobs and housing and etc.
Having been in the community, or very close to the community for, approximately 20 years at that point, 15 to 20 years, and very involved in watching it all unfold for that entire period of time, being really close with people or being like completely in the position myself at certain points. I personally, and the people around me, didn't actually have such harrowing encounters with transphobia directly. It was more, I think, our internal psychological experience of the world. Like, there's the stress of not wanting to be clocked. You don't want people to know that you're trans. Some people have that stress. Some people are like, I'm cool being gender nonconforming, but then their stress usually is like, I hope no one beats me up because I do stand out. And then there's the stress of just being told that people hate you, being told that you're oppressed, being told that you're likely to harm, and that's completely normal for someone like you, and that you need to try really hard to fight against this oppression and band together with the only other people that understand you, that are willing to fight as hard for you as you are, that know how bad it is, that your life is like at risk or whatever. And there are some hateful people out there. They're not usually personally interacting with trans people very often. So there are some risks. Like, I have a Black trans woman friend, and she did get like catcalled when she was walking home down her block, like in the dark and stuff like that, and it would be pretty scary. Although, you don't have to be Black or trans to get catcalled walking home down your block.
It happens to men too sometimes.
Yeah, I met a guy on a train once who was like, yo, like, men are scary to me too. He was like telling me the story, like, masculinity, like aggression, like it's bad for men too. And I just like let him get it all off his chest, and was like, oh God, that guy like really needed to let that out. Like, it there's, everyone can sense a threat against their body when they're out in the public, for different reasons. But yeah, like, female or feminine people can often feel sexualized, so they feel like the threat would be like a more sexual nature.
Absolutely.
Which is super terrifying. So there's real stuff, and it is horrible to hear lawmakers kind of say like, we don't really agree with you, and we think that we should like sort of like impose restrictions against you living your life to the best of your ability, whatever, like getting what you need. So that's how you see it. So then it's just psychologically distressing, more so than like someone coming up to you and doing something or saying something to you on an average day or week or even month. Some people do have problems in workplaces or with customers if they're in customer service or retail or whatever, where people just don't really like socially jibe with trans people that much. They're just not like that nice. Like they might do accidental microaggressions, or they might actively be like, why do you look like that? Why do you think that way? But it's usually not that bad. There was some validity to our work trying to make people have better job security when they're trans or queer, because there is a little bit of job insecurity there, partly due to people's unfamiliarity with it or prejudices, also partly due to like queer people feeling all this stress and like troubled psychology, and then having trouble being like consistently stable at work, like calm, like not looking out for someone to misgender them, looking out for you're kind of like edgy sometimes, and then the boss will see that and be like, you need to be nicer to the customers. You need to not complain so much about how your coworkers accidentally use the wrong pronoun. Like, please just try to like get along. And like, so there's a little bit of that. And there's a little bit of like, I don't get you. I don't understand you. I don't think I like you. You're kind of weird. I would like you out of my workplace. Like, so that is real, but it's not so bad that we should be, or we like queer people, trans people, gay people, whatever, should be like having this psychology of like, we're so oppressed, we might die.
Yeah.
If we don't fight so bad and make those people shut their mouths every time they think they have something to say about us, they can't say it, So, yeah, it's just, I think the messaging is almost the most harmful part of the whole thing. The story that gets told about what it's like to be a trans person, it gets internalized, and then you're automatically distressed. And that's after you've been distressed about whether or not you're trans for several years. And then you're distressed about how to tell people and what to do about it. And then you're distressed about being oppressed.
Yeah.
and how people will treat you socially, which is legitimately distressing, which is part of why my detransition or desisting was such an easy decision for me. Like, the social aspect is legitimately distressing. And that actually played into Ray's detransition as well. He was like, I just want to be able to relax and not worry what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah, exactly. You spend all this mental energy just, okay, like, do I look like what I need to look like in order to, like, can I not get clocked? Like, are people just humoring me, or are they do they actually think I'm a woman or I'm a man? Like, you're constantly battling, you're questioning, are other people validating my reality or the reality I want to project? And are they going to know that maybe I'm actually born male or female? And yeah, that just seems like such a terrible position to put yourself in.
Yeah, and you don't really put yourself in it on purpose. That's what makes me so like upset and willing to put myself in this position where like so many people that I really like are probably going to hate me when they hear these things, because I haven't really gone around socializing with people being like, I'm gender critical now, like, so yeah, they're gonna like try and, you hear crazy stories, like people try and get people fired, whatever. I would just expect they would not want me to show up at what were my safe spaces for being gender non-conforming and gay. So I'm gonna get kicked out of my safe spaces, whatever, my fun free spaces. But
why do you think there is this element of like you said, canceling and trying to get people fired, and this like really vociferous attack? It's like, oh, you said the wrong thing, you think the wrong beliefs, therefore we're gonna go after you. You're gonna be excommunicated from the community if you don't exactly believe the things we need you to believe.
I could give several different answers to that and strongly believe each answer I give. You can come at it a few different ways, but I could say, oh, it's like it's so cult like. I could say, that's the meanest one to them. Um, I could say, oh, like fragile egos. They're afraid or uncertain about their rights or their position in society, like being safe. So they're lashing out. I could say, ideologically, they think it's 100% accurate that they're oppressed and everyone else is the oppressor. So they have the right. They have to fight for themselves. Like I used to go to like a trans area, like trans like group area, trans and trans expansive, and one of the things they would say a lot is like take up space, which like kind of gets overdone sometimes for some people now. For others though, it's good. They're scared, but to be themselves and like,
So yeah, on one hand, they do this take up space thing where like put yourself out there and just be you and like make people deal with it. On the other hand, there you get a sense of it's important to really emphasize the victimhood of this class of or this category of persons.
yeah.
And why is it so important to be have this victim kind of mentality for the ideology?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was part of the social justice camp. It was all oppressor, oppressed, privileged, and oppressed. It was all like, are you this race or are you oppressed? Are you this sex or are you oppressed? Are you cisgender or are you oppressed? Are you
And oppressed was good.
Oppressed meant that we had to listen to you and that you could tell us to shut up or that we're wrong anytime.
Mm.
And that we had to take it and say, oh, sorry, without questioning. So we didn't even always learn. I was like, it's supposed to be like the facilitators make it such an open space that you can say all your like mistakes out loud. Like say like, I don't know, some microaggression, think that it's fine. And then they teach you like, oh, that's actually not fine. Let's talk about it. But it actually functions so that the privileged people would usually be shamed out of revealing what they actually think because they're supposed to like, already be perfect. They don't want to be imperfect. They don't want to be hateful. They don't want to be racist. So it became this thing also where like we had to say like, I am racist inherently, and I always have to fight against that. Which now I see more in shades of gray. Like I think that there's just a lot more conversation that should be had around that, other than just saying like everyone has to know that they're racist and inherently fight against it and just declare it like a blanket statement like that. That's not super productive. There's more to it. Let's just say that. I'm not going to say like that's a terrible thing starting point for a discussion, but there needs to be a discussion if someone starts like that.
Well, I mean, race technically is only like a 200-300-year-old concept, max. Like there was always ethnicities and peoples and tribes and stuff, but
yeah,
race as we think about it today was never a thing before that.
Yeah, I guess like saying race is socially constructed is supposed to be like accurate, and then saying like gender is socially constructed is the thing that people are fighting over, whether or not that's true. But I just don't feel like talking about Judith Butler anymore, so I don't care that much.
Yeah. Well, she just came out and said some. I mean, every time she comes out and says something, a statement, it's some new silliness.
Yeah. But other reasons. I had more reasons. Why is it so important? Why do trans people get so upset?
Or get so wrapped up in being victims, wrapped up.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some like troubled people gravitate toward this as a solution or as a place where they can fit in while still being troubled, and find like comrades and friends. They also get radicalized politically because it's going hand in hand a lot nowadays to be leftist, whether that's communist, anarchist, something else maybe.
Couldn't agree more.
And also to be trans and queer. So when you get into the group in any way, whether you get in because you're same sex attracted, you get in because you're politically activated and somewhere on the left already, you get in because you're reading a lot of theory and you want to talk to people about it. I've met people like that are nerds. They're not really going to go to anything, but they like to talk about the theory. I don't hate them. They're fine. They're usually interesting. Or you get in because gender stuff, or you get in just because you feel like you don't fit in, or you like to express yourself a lot, wear a lot of crazy clothing, do artistic makeup, maybe even do drag, or just other people who just are misfits, who are troubled for whatever reason and feel like they fit in with these people. Then all of them are kind of pushed, including myself, to sort of be similar to each other in this terrible way that we never wanted to be pushed. Similar ideologically, similar in the way that we view the world around us, and you have to band together. But also there's like the troubled psyches, which are partly, were made worse by the storylines that the community is telling ourselves about ourselves, each other about ourselves, and partly, kind of why we were there in the first place. We were already troubled and we were looking for support. But yeah, there's like personality factors and the political and social radicalization. Some people are just like angry about the whole thing, maybe about the oppression, the storyline they're being told. People are being attacked. People are losing their lives. That's not fair. I'm so angry. Which, I'm not gonna get into all of like how much of that storyline is true or not at this exact moment, but that's a conversation I'm highly interested in. But yeah, like they're being told that stuff, and also sometimes they're just already like upset or unstable or need an outlet for their aggression. There's also like people came from like the punk scene or whatever. The punk scene kind of died. Like who's moshing, who's punching each other now?
I'm still here, don't worry.
It says no signal, but I can hear you.
Yeah. My camera overheated. I just gotta let it cool off for a minute.
All right. Should we keep going?
Yeah, the punk scene. Oh God, I don't know if you've heard that theory. Gosh, it was like how the punk basically. There's been like 5 different generations or 5 different iterations of punk. And like gender is kind of the newest, right? Like,
oh my gosh, that Dr. Oz Hakim, the psychologist or psychiatrist, I think forensic psychiatrist in the UK, he's gender critical. He says like he's goth, and that was one of the phases, and he says like gender's the new phase. Yeah. And he worked with a lot of people who were either trans identifying or gender questioning in a like psychiatric or psychological setting, like group therapy. So like he really means it, like based on his life experience of becoming goth as a teenager and then watching these people deal with gender. He's like, this is the next phase of that type of young adult or teenage expression. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it seems to make perfect sense in the sense that like people who maybe feel different or want to be different, they're edgy, or they just don't fit in and they want to come off as different, or they want to have their own thing. They're searching for their identity. They're probably in their teens or young adulthood. And, what's cooler than transgressing, social norms?
Yeah. And there is the like biological, like innate thing where like we're supposed to individuate from our parents as teenagers. So like being a rebellious teenager isn't just like societally mediated or constructed somehow. It actually is, I guess, like biologically like encouraged by our material biology that we're going to rebel as teenagers in order to individuate and become like independent adults from our parents. It's rebellious teenage years. Like if you want to be different from your parents, you can definitely say you don't understand gender, you don't understand queerness at the dinner table, and be different from them.
Where do you land today, like politically? You said you're a Marxist-feminist.
Yeah.
Are you still kind of exploring things? Are you do you have any hesitations on certain things on the left, or on the Marxist left?
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, I feel very strong using Marxism and communism, like materialism and Marxist feminism, and talking about reproductive labor, all that kind of stuff, descriptively, to say like, here are the problems and here are the like root causes of the problems. Here's what needs to change, right?
mhm.
Like the ultimate root cause, the biggest, most systemic root cause. And I can talk about capitalism, like how capitalism incentivizes people to act in ways that they wouldn't otherwise act, like not ethically or whatever, like greedy or whatever. And I think that's super important. People don't talk about it enough. But I'm much stronger on being descriptive in that way rather than being prescriptive about what do we do next. And I kind of think Marx maybe kind of was more descriptive than prescriptive about what do we do next. Like he didn't really write like what are we going to do
That's
so
right.
much as he wrote like, so that's kind of why, because I studied like Marx and Engels. And so that's like the huge chunk of what I got was like, how can I analyze things? How can I see things? How can I explain things? Like, how can I be grounded in material reality? How can I try to look back in history and see what happened in a way that I hadn't like seen it before? But I don't feel like I definitely want to tell us what to do next all the time, you know? Um, so I'm like one of those people who could waffle around uh, on the left in any conversation and be called like a dirty reformist or like an extreme revolutionary in any given conversation, like just depending on what I'm saying. But when I most accurately represent myself, I think the best representation is like I'm not really too concerned about like trying to say I know best what to do about it, but more like if we could all get this sort of awareness of how to analyze things and see what's going on and what the problems, what the root causes of the problems are, and what's the systemic image. How is capitalism giving us bad incentives? That's just one of my favorite things that I learned. Stuff like that, then like, we can kind of come together and come up with, solutions. Like I don't have to be the one who says like, we need to do a revolution this way and overthrow this that way, or we need to make a co-op and like get more people into unions, or we need to this, we need to that. Like, we do need to vote, we don't need to vote. Like, I don't feel like I'm the like end all be all of like that knowledge. Like, I know that I don't know. So I can have some opinions on that, but they're more loosely held. And that's kind of why I went into that communist group, which kind of broke apart and then became the queer communist group afterwards. Because I was like, I want to see what they're doing. Like, I want to get involved in doing the work, and then like being around like a group of people who are coming together to do the work. Then I can kind of like, be around these various people and have conversations and do whatever else we're doing. Like we did try to have discussions or do trainings or, strategy or whatever. But yeah, it wasn't as in depth as I wanted. I didn't like refine my views on that as much as I wanted, but
I think your instincts
yeah.
on Marx and Engels and Marxism, or at least classical Marxism, are correct in general, especially in the main point of like, yeah, Marx and Engels and even Lenin and Trotsky, they didn't set out with like, here's a plan, here's how society's going to look, and we
Yeah.
just need to get there. We need to convince people that this way that we've thought about is of doing society is going to be great. It's
Yeah.
much more along the lines of like, capitalism itself sets up the conditions for the workers to organize against their bosses, the capitalists, uh, and then overthrow the system for their own benefit, because they're going to see just by working together in these factories in the situation that clearly it's not really working in their interests. And so it's really, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the workers. It's not even the Marxists who decide things. It's going to be the workers leading the revolution. The Marxists are going to be
Yeah.
the ones who are kind of the people who are studying history, studying capitalism, studying economics, philosophy, anthropology, science, who will kind of, the idea is that they're going to midwife the thing into
Yeah,
kind of the
yeah.
right way, and also make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, that we don't
Hmm.
repeat Stalinism, that we don't repeat reformism, that we don't repeat
Yeah.
any of the other failures.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like reformism is the one that I'm most likely to get sidetracked by. And sometimes I may even defend that.
Well, like,
Like
so that so
certain activities.
reforms themselves are not, like, they can actually be advances in
Hmm.
the struggle for socialism. Like Trotsky wrote the transitional program, and the whole point was to make demands, specific demands that would actually push the struggle forward. So
Hmm.
make a demand that the capitalist, that the society should be able to meet, but actually can't. And so,
Yeah.
and then you expose the system for not being able to actually meet these really what should be basic demands of society, and for the workers. And so the more you kind of you push the struggle forward with demands that seem like like reforms in isolation by themselves actually work to radicalize and push the struggle forward.
Yeah.
So which is one of the reasons why I think Trotskyism is pretty cool, because and they focus, the Trotskyists, myself, on following the example of the Bolsheviks, not in the sense of we need to do everything they do, but they learn the lessons from them, because they were the ones who kind of best figured out how to form a party, how to get their message across, how to organize, how to speak to the workers, how to weigh the balance of different class interests against each other to overtake, and when to strike.
Hmm.
The when depending on the material conditions, because if you strike too early, it doesn't make any sense. You're going to lose, and you might.
Did Trotsky write much, or did he
Yes,
mostly
he wrote
do
a lot.
a lot of stuff?
he
Okay.
did a lot, but he wrote a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. I feel like I need to get a grip on like Lenin and I guess maybe like Trotsky and like Rosa Luxemburg next or something.
Yeah, those are my top three from I would say the 20th century. Those are probably the three most based people. And the funny thing is, all three of them had arguments with each other, right? Rosa Luxemburg was critical of Lenin until she wasn't. Trotsky and Lenin were like this until the revolution, right? Like the Marxist-Leninists, the Stalinists will always point out how Trotsky and how Lenin and Trotsky argued with each other and thought they were idiots until they came together and realized, oh, actually no, on the fundamental issues we completely agree, until Lenin's death. And then you can't entirely blame Stalinists and Stalin for everything. They had the reasons for why everything happened the way it did, but
Okay.
ultimately there was a kind of betrayal of the prospect of world revolution and of keeping the workers' democracy healthy. So
Yeah. I'm just like very interested in a lot of things. I think like I've just been like super fascinated with the idea of like worker co-ops as like a like less sort of violent like seize the means of production type thing, but then I feel like it wouldn't be done on mass scale because it's not possible. But I get fascinated with all sorts of different possibilities of what people could do to move us toward a better place. But yeah, it's hard. I've heard the super hardline revolutionaries who are like, you should like make capitalism like just get so much worse so that, and you just like make it brutal for everyone, make it terrible. Yeah, so that everyone just like has to do a violent uprising tomorrow, and it's no longer like you can no longer be comfortable sitting at home. Like I've heard that, and
that wouldn't even work.
I can't imagine living like that and being okay trying to do that.
I
Like,
mean,
first off, for
really,
myself, and second off, for what I'm doing to the world around me. So,
really, I mean, these debates we're all having as, you know, leftists and Marxists and social democrats are all basically useless because there is no left at the moment. There's no real left. Like what we call the left is basically
yeah.
versions of the right. The Democrats, even the working class, the so-called working class parties. Like, until there is an actual independent workers' party in the United States and in some of the other major industrial countries, there's really not much to do or even talk about. Once that becomes established for, you know, hopefully in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, then we can start actually, you know, it'll make sense to be a Marxist and to talk about these ideas a lot more. There'll be some purchase to these ideas, but until then, it's just, you're just kind of shit pissing in the wind.
Yeah. I think I put this up behind me. I'm pretty sure Daniel Quinn said something like, if you change the way you think, then you'll be able, like, in order to change the way you live, first you have to change the way you think, or something like that. And I kind of think that's sort of where we're at. Like, I think most people don't even understand what Marxism or communism is. It's smeared everywhere. And, like, there are all the people who say they're leftists or say they're communists or socialists who, like, I feel are not based in, like, material reality, or who are not, you know, focusing on like actual, like, progress, or actually, like, focusing on capitalism or anything like that. Which is kind of what I thought we would talk about as well. A lot of, like, why is the gender identity ideology destructive to kind of like leftist, Marxist, communist, materialist,
what are your thoughts on that
aims and goals? My personal thought, the part that I'm grounded in, that I feel most strong about, has to do with the Marxist feminism. I think it's antithetical to it. So I think Marxist feminism is grounded in a material reality that we can't avoid. It's just part of life. You know, people have a biological sex that has impacted how people have lived within society in their lives, like, always. That's a real thing. It's worth studying. It's worth thinking about. Gender identity ideology is totally muddling that, and it's taking so many people, it almost took me, away from identifying as a woman or feeling comfortable thinking about yourself as a woman or a female, or wanting to learn about previous women, how they were treated, all this work that they did and all the books they wrote and everything to get us where we are. And you feel alienated from that. You don't identify with them. You don't want to do activism for your sex to have better, like, material reality anymore, because it doesn't feel good to you. You don't want to be part of that. So it's just like taking away a lot of the power that women could have, socially and politically, because those people are wasting their time being distressed about their gender and being encouraged to disidentify with being a woman and to leave them behind. Be like, I don't want that. Instead of being like, yeah, I'm a woman. In fact, it's great to be a gender non-conforming woman. Vulnerability and emotions can be a strength, not just a weakness. Femininity has a lot of strengths to it. You can also have a lot of masculinity as a woman. Those can be great things, strengths too. And, you can, like, be a caregiver for your children, your family, and keep up your house as your main thing. Or you can also, like, go into the business world and do that as your main thing. Or you can have some combination of those, or you go garden, try to live on a commune, whatever. Like, and they're all valid ways to be. And we're not going to try and, like, materially disadvantage one choice over the other, which is currently what capitalism does, which is why I'm a Marxist feminist. Like, Sylvia Federici and people like her are always talking about, like, wages for housework and stuff like that. which like I don't know if wages for housework is the exact right solution to implement, but I think all of us need to be thinking about this as a problem. Like, like when somebody labors in the home entirely for like 20 years, they have no resume, and then the person who brought in the money economically into that home passes away and doesn't leave an inheritance, or turns on them, becomes a bad person, and it's no longer a safe home. That person has like no economic, like they can't support, they're like subordinate, they're like weak, they can't get out. That's not fair. They worked 20 years, they just didn't work for wages, and they're stuck. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of the injustice toward females nowadays. It's like, you didn't make the money, you're stuck kind of following the other person around because you can't get a job, or you can't move, or you don't have savings, or whatever. So I feel like that's one of the most basic Marxist feminist things, and that's what we should be focusing on, not sitting around reading Reddit like, am I really a girl? Am I a boy? Am I neither?
One boy on the inside.
Yeah, I thought I was a man on the inside, or that I was more close to that than a girl, so I might as well live as that. It might feel more authentic and better. I was like, I wasn't born being an average like feminine girl, and I also was like hateful towards femininity at that point, like, oh, femininity is weak. So it's real. You really get looped into that and just spin your wheels and waste your time on that for potentially years, and it can like mess your psyche up, like reduce your capability to do things in the world. So we're losing these people that could be helping us with these problems. And I think that's why it's bad.
That might be a good spot to end on. I have I know there's some really good kind of content and analysis on Marxist content analysis on what you were just talking about, social reproduction. There's a book I have by Nancy Fraser where she talks. She has a whole section on reproductive labor, or reproduction anyway, as a kind of a site of a part of capitalist society that we don't talk about enough. But there's also some like interesting critiques on the Marxist side on the idea of paid labor, and different ideas around that. So maybe I'll find some and send that to you. And
that'd be sweet.
And there's some good stuff. I was
gonna say my ADHD keeps me from completing most books, but I'll give it my best.
Okay. Well, some of it we might be able to do in like video form too. That might be a bit shorter. There's I might send you some stuff on Trotsky, Luxemburg, Lenin in relation to the Soviet Union and Stalin and all that stuff too. But do you have any? What would be your final parting thoughts on gender, this experience, your experience, and the left in general? Anything or anything you'd want to tell just in the audience? Or where to find you?
I would say okay, here's a good one. The reason that I can speak like this today is because my material conditions have improved, because I'm secure, and because I have a partner who will support me and assures me that, if we have like a complete drop in our material conditions, like we're gonna climb out of it together. And I believe him, and I believe in his abilities and mine together. So it really does matter for anyone to be able to speak freely, be themselves, be brave, be strong, put their ideas out there no matter what they feel like the backlash will be. It matters that they feel secure, like psychologically, emotionally, feel safe at home, and have good material conditions and faith that they can bounce back from things. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have that. So I'm super lucky. And yeah, it's almost all able to be attributed to Ray and me as a team, that either of us are ready to speak up, willing to put ourselves out there like this, because, I do believe the storyline that I may get, hate or rejection from talking like this.
Yeah, could be. Well, hopefully not too much. Hopefully you'll be okay. And if people, losers on Twitter or losers in real life.
Losers on Twitter don't bother me. I just wonder, like, the people that I've spent time with before, in
right.
real life.
Well, you know what? Hopefully
we'll
they'll see your your honesty and your integrity, and be willing to listen, at least entertain what you have to say, without.
Yeah, I don't want to be hard-headed or cruel about anything. I don't want to be pushed into any pure ideology that I feel like I have to toe the line for, So hopefully I'm not too scary to have conversations with, even if they feel confrontational. I just know that also the other thing, if you're going to have conversations with someone on an issue that one or both of you might be highly emotional about, got to think about whether you're in your nervous system state where you can access your logical mind, or whether you're in your like fight or flight, fawn or freeze nervous system state and need to either like figure out how to calm that down in order to continue the conversation, or like cut the conversation and revisit it later. Because like even with my best friend, we can't talk about the trans or the gender stuff. If either of us go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, we just go, all right, we tried, and we hang up.
What's your message to anyone who may be seeing this, who is considering a gender transition or has transitioned, and is
it's a rough life usually. Queer spaces are great for a safe space for self-expression, but don't allow yourself to get told one story about life and accept it unquestioningly. Try to figure out all the stories that people are telling about life, that you're interested in a certain aspect, like gender, or how trans people are treated, or how to make a freer, more self-expressive society. Go hear all the sides without trying to let someone tell you like that one's bad, they're hateful, and not listen. Because I let everyone tell me that one's bad, they're hateful for like 15 to 20 years. I never looked at anything. I didn't even look at what J.K. Rowling said, and that was like way late in the game, but like I didn't look at anything that anyone said that didn't agree with this stuff, because I was told like those are the bad people.
Those are the bad people.
If you're empathetic, you don't let them say words.
Those
so
are
I was
the
like,
fascists.
okay, I won't read their words. Turns out that was like a really terrible idea, and I wasted a bunch of time like not understanding things because I let people tell me that.
That's a great message to leave on. All right, thanks a lot, Jules. This was great.
All right, sweet.
Follow Jules. I left her Twitter in the description of the video. So yeah, go check her out.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye everybody. Ending stream now. Okay.